I should have known something was wrong when the job listing promised $28 an hour, cash at the end of every shift, just to sit behind a counter at a gas station nobody visited after dark. At the time, I told myself not to be paranoid. I told myself rural Nevada had plenty of weird little businesses that paid under the table because they were too far from everything to keep employees. I told myself a lot of things back then, mostly because the truth was worse. I was broke, exhausted, and one missed payment away from losing the only car I had left. My name is Ethan Miller, and 3 weeks before I found the ad for Hollow Pines Gas and Mart, I had been laid off from a warehouse outside Reno where I spent 10 hours a night loading freight under buzzing lights and pretending my back did not hurt as badly as it did. The manager called it downsizing. I called it the beginning of the end. Rent was due in 12 days. My checking account had less than $40 in it. My phone buzzed every morning with reminders from the bank, the electric company, the insurance company, and people who all wanted money I did not have. I was 34 years old, sitting in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like instant coffee and old carpet, scrolling through job listings at 2 in the morning because I could not sleep. Security guard, dishwasher, overnight stalker, casino janitor. Nothing paid enough, and everything wanted experience I either did not have or references I was too embarrassed to call. Then I saw it. Night clerk needed. Hollow Pines Gas and Mart, rural Nevada. 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., $28 an hour. Cash paid daily. Must be able to work alone. Must be able to follow written instructions exactly. That last sentence made me pause. I remember leaning closer to the laptop screen, the blue light making my eyes ache, reading it again like it might change if I stared long enough. Must be able to follow written instructions exactly. It sounded strict, but not impossible. Maybe they had cash handling procedures. Maybe the owner was just old-fashioned. Maybe they had been robbed before. I tried to make it normal because I needed it to be normal. The listing had no company website, no employee photos, no cheerful paragraph about joining a family-owned business. Just the address, the pay, the hours, and a phone number with a 775 area code. I looked it up on the map. Hollow Pines was not really a town, more like a name slapped onto an empty stretch of highway somewhere east of Fallon, surrounded by miles of desert, dry lake beds, and roads that looked like they forgot where they were going. The gas station was nearly 60 miles from Reno. Too far for comfort, but close enough that I could make the drive if the money was real. I applied before I could talk myself out of it. I attached a resume that made my life look more stable than it was, wrote one short message saying I had overnight experience and reliable transportation, then hit send. The second my finger left the trackpad, I felt stupid. No legitimate job paying that much would hire someone like me that fast. I closed the laptop, rubbed my face, and laughed under my breath because laughing felt better than admitting I was scared. 7 minutes later, my phone rang. I stared at the unknown number on the screen while my apartment sat completely silent around me. For some reason, before I answered, I glanced toward the window, half expecting to see headlights waiting in the parking lot below. There were none. Just my reflection in the dark glass, pale, unshaven, and tired enough to look like someone else. I answered anyway. A man with a dry, flat voice asked if I was Ethan Miller. I said yes. He said his name was Mr. Harris and that he managed Hollow Pines Gas and Mart. He did not ask me about my work history. He did not ask why I left my last job. He did not ask if I had references or whether I could pass a background check. All he asked was whether I owned a car, whether I could stay awake overnight, and whether I could read a list of rules without arguing about them. I almost laughed, but something about his tone stopped me. He sounded tired, not impatient, like he had asked those same questions too many times and already knew how most answers ended. I told him I could follow instructions. There was a pause on the line, long enough for me to hear the faint hum of my refrigerator in the kitchen. Then he said, "Good, because out there, that matters more than customer service." I should have hung up. I know that now. But when a man offers you cash at sunrise and your landlord has already taped a notice to your door, common sense starts sounding like a luxury. Mr. Harris told me to meet him at a diner off Highway 50 at 9:30 the next night. He said he would give me the keys, the uniform shirt, and everything else I needed for my first shift. Before I could ask why we were meeting at a diner instead of the gas station, he said one more thing. "Do not be late, Ethan. The first night is when people make mistakes." Then the call ended, and I sat there holding the phone against my ear while the screen went dark. Outside, A car passed through the apartment lot, its headlights sliding across my ceiling for just a second before disappearing. I told myself it was just a job, just a counter, just a lonely gas station in the desert. But deep down, somewhere beneath the panic and the unpaid bills, I already knew I had just agreed to something that was waiting for me. I wiped the words off my car window with the sleeve of the uniform shirt before I could think about them too long. The dust smeared across the glass in pale gray streaks, but for a second, I could still see the shape of the letters underneath, like they had been pressed deeper than dust should go. Do not give directions to Route 0. I told myself it had to be the waitress. Maybe she had seen the envelope, guessed I was headed to Hollow Pines, and decided to give the new guy one more scare. It was mean, sure, but it was possible. Possible was good. Possible meant normal. I started the car and pulled back on a Highway 50, heading east, leaving Marlene's behind until the red diner sign shrank into a trembling dot in my rearview mirror. The road out there had a way of making distance feel personal. It did not curve much. It did not offer much to look at. Just blacktop, pale gravel shoulders, barbed wire fences, and desert stretching flat beneath a moon that looked too bright and too far away. Every few miles, my headlights caught a road sign or a dead shrub or a reflector post, and each one appeared out of the dark so suddenly that my hands tightened on the wheel. My phone lost service about 15 minutes after I left the diner. I watched the bars drop from 2 to 1 to nothing, then told myself I had downloaded the route and did not need service anyway. The directions said Hollow Pines was 23 miles ahead, though there were no signs for it. Just a thin gray line on the map, a station icon, and then nothing for miles in every direction. At 10:41, the highway dipped between two low ridges, and the glow appeared on the horizon. At first, I thought it was another car. Then the light widened into a pale yellow haze, floating above the desert like a small piece of town had been dropped in the wrong place. Hollow Pines Gas and Mart came into view at 10:47. I remember the exact time because the dashboard clock blinked once as I pulled in, jumping from 10:46 to 10:47 like it had been waiting. The station was smaller than I expected. For pumps under a flat metal canopy, a squat convenience store with wide front windows, a faded sign that said open 24 hours, even though there was not another building anywhere nearby. The main sign rose on a pole near the road, but part of the lettering had burned out, so Hollow Pines looked like whole OWPNES. Beneath it, the gas prices flickered between numbers too quickly to read. The lights over the pumps were harsh and white, bright enough to make the concrete shine, but beyond the canopy the darkness was absolute. Not dark like a quiet street, dark like a wall. I parked near the front door and sat there with the engine running, letting the heater push warm air against my hands. The store looked normal through the glass. Rows of chips and candy. A coffee station. A rotating hot dog machine with nothing on it. A small counter with a register and a lottery ticket display. Normal things. Ordinary things. I tried to focus on them. Then I noticed the payphone. It stood outside near the ice machine, half hidden in shadow, one of those old metal wall phones with a scratched black receiver and a coiled cord hanging beneath it. I had not seen a working payphone in years. This one looked freshly cleaned. The metal caught the light. The receiver rested neatly in place. I thought of the waitress saying, "If the phone outside rings, let it ring," and my throat went dry for no reason. The key turned easily in the front door. A little bell above the frame gave a weak jingle as I stepped inside, and the smell hit me all at once. Burned coffee, floor cleaner, rubber mats, stale air conditioning, and something faintly dusty underneath, like old paper left in a hot car. The lights hummed overhead. The refrigerator cases buzzed along the back wall. Somewhere behind the counter, an ice maker knocked twice, hard enough to make me flinch. I laughed at myself, locked the door behind me, then unlocked it again when I remembered this was supposed to be an open business. The register was already on. A sticky note beside it gave the code Mr. Harris had mentioned. There was a small office behind the counter, barely large enough for a desk, a rolling chair, and a wall of security monitors. 6 of them showed ordinary angles: front door, pumps, aisles, stockroom hall, backlot, counter. The 7th monitor showed a view of empty desert behind the building. No road, no fence, no dumpster, just pale dirt and darkness beyond the reach of a single floodlight. The label beneath the screen read Camera 7 in black marker. Something about that view bothered me. It was too still. Even the wind seemed to avoid it. I put the envelope on the counter and tried to get settled like this was any other job. I checked the bathroom keys, counted the till, found the emergency numbers taped beside the phone behind the register. There was a radio, but the power light stayed dark no matter which button I pressed. There was an employee microwave with a cracked handle. There was a shelf of expired-looking motor oil and a stack of tourist maps for places at least 100 miles away. Behind the counter, under a plastic paperweight shaped like a pine tree, I found a handwritten note from Mr. Harris that said, "Read the full sheet before 11:45. Do not wait until something happens." I looked at the clock above the cigarettes. 11:13. Plenty of time. That was what I told myself. Plenty of time to read a single page. Instead, I walked the aisles because I wanted the place to feel familiar first. I wanted to know where the exits were, where the light switches were, where the breaker box might be if the power went out. The electrical room was at the end of a short hall beside the stockroom. The smallest key on my ring, the red one, fit the lock, but I did not turn it. Not yet. I only stood there with my fingertips on the key, listening. The building made small sounds around me. Coolers clicking. Fluorescent bulbs buzzing. Wind pressing softly against the glass. Then, from somewhere outside, came a faint metallic creak. I froze. It came again, slow and thin, like an old sign swinging even though I had not seen one moving. I went back to the front windows and looked out across the pumps. Nothing. My car sat alone near the door. The highway was empty in both directions. No headlights. No taillights. No dust. Just the canopy lights pouring down onto 4 silent pumps. Pump 4 was farthest from the store, closest to the edge of the darkness. Its hose hung in place, but the little digital screen was on, glowing green. The others were dark. I told myself pumps probably did that sometimes. Electrical issue. Old equipment. Rural station. Normal explanations lined up in my head like sandbags against a flood. When I turned back toward the counter, I noticed the envelope had moved. I was sure I had left it beside the register, but now it sat in the center of the counter, squared neatly with the edge, as if someone had placed it there for me. My heart gave one hard thud. I looked toward the office monitors. The counter camera showed me standing alone. The aisles were empty. The front door had not opened. I waited for the footage to catch up, thinking maybe there was a delay, but nothing changed. Just me, the envelope, and my own pale face reflected in the monitor glass. I picked it up. The paper felt warmer than it should have. On the front, in handwriting I did not recognize, were the words. For the new night clerk. Read before midnight. The clock above the cigarettes clicked to 11:44, though I could have sworn it had only been 11:13 a few minutes ago. My mouth went dry. I tore open the envelope, pulled out the folded sheet, and for the first time since taking the job, I stopped trying to convince myself that Hollow Pines was normal. I unfolded the sheet slowly, holding it flat against the counter with both hands because the air conditioning vent above me kept making the edges flutter. At first, I expected some long employee handbook, maybe a list of store policies dressed up to sound creepy, but there were only 7 rules, typed in uneven black letters on paper that looked older than the printer that made it. The top line read, "Rules for surviving the night shift at Hollow Pines." Surviving. Not working. Not completing. Surviving. I stared at that word until the hum of the lights seemed to grow louder. Then I read the first rule. Never serve a customer whose car has no headlights after midnight. I checked the clock above the cigarettes. 11:46. 14 minutes until midnight. My first reaction was to laugh, but the sound did not come out right. It cracked in my throat and died there. I read the second rule. If someone pays with a $2 bill dated after the current year, do not accept it. Refuse the sale, return the bill, and say the register is closed. I looked at the cash drawer, then at the little plastic tray where customers were supposed to put money. A $2 bill from the future. That was ridiculous. The kind of thing a bored employee would invent after too many quiet shifts. Still, I felt the skin along my arms tighten. Rule 3 said, do not answer the payphone if it rings at 1:17 in the morning. No matter who it sounds like. No matter what they say. I looked through the front window at the payphone outside near the ice machine. It sat perfectly still under the edge of the canopy light, receiver in place, cord hanging straight down. No matter who it sounds like. I swallowed and kept reading. Rule 4. If pump 4 starts running by itself at 3:33 in the morning, shut off. The main breaker before 3:40. Do not touch the pump. Do not step in the fuel. Rule 5. Never give directions to anyone asking for Route 0. There is no Route 0. If you explain that to them, they will know you can see the road. My eyes stop there. I read it again, slower. They will know you can see the road. The words from my car window came back so sharply I could almost see them traced in dust again. Do not give directions to Route 0. My mouth had gone completely dry. I reached for the coffee pot beside the register, found it empty, and set it back down with a small clatter that sounded too loud in the empty store. Rule 6 said, if the woman in the red coat enters the store, remove your name badge before she sees it. If she says your name first, do not answer. Hide in the stockroom until the bell above the door rings 3 times. I touched the plastic badge pinned to my chest. Ethan. The letters suddenly felt huge, like I had taped my identity to myself for anything outside to read. The 7th rule was shorter than the others. At sunrise, burn this list and write a new one for the next employee. I stood there for a long time after that, waiting for the fear to become something else. Anger, maybe. Embarrassment. The kind of annoyance you feel when someone goes too far with a prank. But the fear stayed where it was, low in my stomach, heavy and cold. I turned the sheet over, looking for a signature or company logo. Nothing. Just a faint brown stain near the bottom corner and a handwritten sentence so small I almost missed it. The rules are not warnings. They are receipts. I did not understand what that meant then. I wish I had. I checked the monitors again. Front door empty. Pumps empty. Aisles empty. Stockroom hall empty. Back lot empty. Camera 7 empty desert. My own breathing sounded too loud in my ears. I told myself to be rational. People in rural places had traditions. Maybe a previous clerk had written this as a joke, and Mr. Harris kept it because it scared employees into staying alert. Maybe Route 0 was local slang for some private road people got lost on. Maybe the woman in the red coat was a difficult customer everyone knew. Maybe the payphone belonged to some prank caller who liked messing with whoever worked nights. Every rule had a possible explanation if I bent my mind hard enough. I folded the sheet and unfolded it again. The paper made a dry, whispering sound. Outside, wind moved a thin line of dust across the concrete, and the overhead canopy lights flickered once, all 4 at the same time. I looked at the clock. 11:53. 7 minutes. I decided I would read the rules one more time, memorize the important parts, and then put the sheet under the register. Not because I believed it, I told myself. Just because $28 an hour was enough money to humor an old superstition for one night. I read them again, this time out loud under my breath, stopping after each line to picture what I was supposed to do. No headlights after midnight. Do not take the wrong $2 bill. Do not answer the payphone at 1:17. Pump 4 at 3:33, breaker before 3:40. No directions to Route 0. Hide my name badge from the woman in red. Burn the list at sunrise. Saying them aloud made the store feel smaller. The shelves seemed closer. The windows seemed darker. My voice barely reached the far aisle before the hum of the coolers swallowed it. At 11:58, I taped the rule sheet to the underside of the counter where I could grab it quickly, but customers would not see it. Then I stood there with my hands flat on the counter, watching the red numbers of the clock inch toward midnight. I remember thinking that nothing would happen. That was the last comfortable thought I had that night. The minute changed. 12:00. The store lights buzzed. The register made a soft clicking sound, even though I had not touched it. Somewhere outside, the payphone cord began to sway gently, though there was no wind inside the little metal booth. I held my breath. Nothing else happened. 1 minute passed. Then 2. By 12:03, I started to feel foolish again. I let out a shaky laugh and rubbed both hands over my face. See, I whispered to myself. Just a job. Just a stupid list. At 12:04, a shape appeared on the highway to the west. No engine sound reached the store. No white beams cut through the darkness. Just a black car rolling out of the night as smoothly as if someone had pushed it downhill. It crossed the edge of the canopy light and eased up beside Pump 2. An old Buick, long and dark, with chrome trim that reflected the station lights in thin silver lines. Its headlights were off. Its windows were too dark to see through. My heart began to pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked at the rule sheet hidden beneath the counter, then back at the car. Midnight had passed 4 minutes ago. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out wearing a tan cowboy hat and a gray suit that looked decades out of date. He moved slowly, calmly, like someone who had all the time in the world. I glanced at the pump monitor. Pump 2 had not activated. He was not getting gas. He was coming inside. The bell above the door gave one weak jingle as he entered, and the air that came in with him smelled like hot dust and old pennies. I forced myself to stand straight behind the counter, every normal part of me trying to take over. Customers came in. Clerks helped them. That was the job. The man stopped just inside the door and looked around the store with a polite, empty smile. Then he turned his head toward me. I waited for him to say something first, because I suddenly could not remember if any of the rules mentioned speaking. His eyes were pale, almost colorless beneath the brim of his hat. For one awful second, neither of us moved. Then he smiled wider and said, "Evening, Ethan." The sound of my name in that man's mouth did something to me I cannot fully explain. It was not loud. It was not threatening. He said it the way any customer might say the name printed on a badge, casual and friendly, but my skin tightened under the green uniform shirt as if the plastic letters on my chest had suddenly become hot. I looked down before I could stop myself. Ethan. Of course he knew my name. It was right there. I told myself that immediately, almost desperately. He saw the badge. That was all. Nothing strange about that. Nothing except the car outside with no headlights. Nothing except the fact that midnight had passed. Nothing except the rule taped beneath the counter, close enough that my fingers brushed the edge of the paper when I shifted my hand. The man in the gray suit walked toward the register with slow, careful steps. His boots made almost no sound on the tile. That bothered me. Old cowboy boots should have clicked or scraped, or at least carried some dust in with them. But he moved like the floor did not quite trust his weight. He stopped in front of the cigarette display and looked over the rows behind me without blinking. "Pack of Marlboro Reds," he said. "Soft pack, if you have it." His voice was dry and polite, the kind of voice you hear from older men at gas stations all across the West. For one second, that almost helped. This was a normal request. A normal sale. Cigarettes, register, change, have a good night. My body wanted to fall back into the rhythm of work because work was easier than fear. Then I remembered Rule 1. Never serve a customer whose car has no headlights after midnight. He was not asking for gas, I thought. The rule said customer whose car has no headlights. Maybe it only meant fuel. Maybe it meant do not activate the pump. Maybe buying cigarettes did not count. The thought was stupid, but I clung to it because he was standing right there, and I did not know what would happen if I refused. I glanced out the window. The Buick sat beside Pump 2, black and still, its front end angled slightly toward the store. No headlights. No parking lights. Not even the faint orange blink of a dashboard inside. The man followed my eyes to the window, then smiled as though we shared a private joke. "Electrical trouble," he said. "Happens on these old roads." My throat felt tight. I nodded because nodding was safer than speaking. I turned, grabbed the cigarettes, and set them on the counter. My hand shook enough that the pack slid an inch across the laminate. The man placed 2 fingers on top of it to stop it moving. His fingernails were clean, but there was dust in the creases of his knuckles, pale desert dust, the same color as the dry lake beds outside. "How much do I owe you, Ethan?" he asked. Again my name. Again, that soft pressure behind it. I wanted to tell him not to say it. I wanted to rip the badge off and throw it under the counter. Instead, I looked at the register screen. $7.89. My voice came out before I could stop it. $7.89. The moment I spoke, the cooler lights along the back wall flickered off and on. Not long. Less than a second. But long enough for the glass doors to become mirrors, and in that blink of reflection, I saw the counter behind me. I saw myself. I saw the empty aisle. I did not see the man. I froze with my hand still hovering over the register keys. The cooler lights steadied. The reflection became rows of soda again. I looked at the man directly. He was still there, smiling politely, one hand resting on the cigarettes. My heartbeat hammered so hard I could barely hear the hum of the building. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded bill. I knew what it would be before he opened it. Some part of me knew because fear recognizes the shape of a trap before the mind has words for it. A $2 bill. He laid it flat on the counter, smoothing it with the careful affection of someone handling an old photograph. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Faded green ink. Thomas Jefferson in the center. Corners worn soft from use. Then my eyes dropped to the series date. 2031. I stopped breathing. Rule 2 came back clear and cold. If someone pays with a $2 bill dated after the current year, do not accept it. Refuse the sale, return the bill, and say the register is closed. My fingers were already touching the edge of the bill. That is what still keeps me awake when I think about it. Not that I saw it. Not that he gave it to me. That I touched it before I remembered. The paper felt wrong. Too smooth. Almost damp, though it looked dry. I pulled my hand back as if the counter had shocked me. The man's smile did not change, but his eyes moved to my fingers. Something in the air shifted. The store seemed to grow quieter around us, the coolers fading, the lights thinning, the desert pressing against every window. I forced myself to speak. Register is closed, I said. It was the exact phrase from the rule, but my voice shook so badly it barely sounded like mine. I cannot take this. The man tilted his head. Closed? He asked. At 12:14 in the morning? I nodded once. He did not look angry. That was worse. Anger would have been human. Instead, he looked amused, like a teacher watching a child almost solve a problem. You already gave me the price, Ethan, he said. That is not the same as taking payment. I slid the bill back toward him using the corner of the cigarette pack, careful not to touch it again. The sale is refused. The register is closed. For a moment, the man did nothing. Then his fingers closed over the bill, slowly. The second he lifted it from the counter, every monitor in the office behind me gave a soft burst of static. I turned my head just enough to see the camera wall. Front door empty. Pumps empty. Counter empty except for me. On every screen, I stood alone behind the register, staring at nobody. My stomach twisted so hard I almost doubled over. I looked back. The man was still in front of me. He tapped the cigarette pack twice with one finger. Keep them, he said. I will be back when your register opens. He turned and walked to the door. The bell gave a weak, warped jingle as he stepped outside. I watched him cross the concrete to the Buick. He never looked back. The car door opened without a sound. He got in. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the Buick rolled backward from pump 2, still without headlights, still without engine noise, and slipped past the edge of the canopy light into the desert dark. It did not turn onto the highway. It simply faded into the black space beyond the pumps, where there should have been nothing but flat dirt. I stood behind the counter, unable to move, staring through the window until my eyes watered. Then the speaker above pump 2 crackled. A burst of static hissed across the empty station. My own voice came through it, thin and delayed, repeating the words I had spoken to him. 789. 789. 789. I slapped both hands over my mouth like I could force the sound back inside me. The pump screen lit up green. The numbers rolled by themselves, no fuel flowing, no handle lifted, just digits climbing in silence. $7.89. Then the screen went dark. In the office, camera 7 flickered. For one frame, maybe less, the empty desert behind the store was not empty. A line of dark cars sat out there with their headlights off, parked side by side in the dirt, all facing the back door. Then the image cleared, and there was only darkness again. I backed away from the counter, my legs weak, and reached under it for the rule sheet with shaking fingers. I had not served him, I told myself. I had refused the bill. I had said the right words. But deep down, I knew I had already made the first mistake. I had spoken to him, and now something outside had my voice. I grabbed the rule sheet so fast the tape tore loose from the underside of the counter. For a few seconds, all I could do was stare at the words while my hands shook hard enough to make the paper rattle. Rule 1 had been clear. Rule 2 had been clear. I had followed them too late, or half followed them, or followed them in a way that did not matter because the man in the gray suit had still gotten something from me. My voice. I kept hearing it outside through the pump speaker, even after the sound had stopped, like the station itself had learned the shape of it and was whispering it through the walls. 789. 789. I backed into the tiny office and sat down hard in the rolling chair, facing the monitors. The store was empty. The pumps were empty. Camera 7 showed nothing but the strip of dirt behind the building and the black desert beyond it. I watched that screen longer than I should have, waiting for the line of dark cars to appear again. They did not. The footage looked normal, but that somehow made it worse. Normal had become a costume this place wore when it wanted me to doubt myself. I looked at the clock. 12:26. Not even half an hour past midnight. I still had almost 6 hours until sunrise. The thought made my chest tighten. I reached for the landline beside the desk and dialed the number Mr. Harris had taped to the wall. It rang once, then clicked into static. Not a busy signal. Not voicemail. Just a soft, dry hiss like wind moving over sand. I hung up and tried again. This time a voice answered on the first ring. My voice. Register is closed, it said, faint and far away. I slammed the phone down so hard the receiver bounced in the cradle. My stomach turned. I stood up and paced the office, trying to breathe through my nose, trying not to panic. There had to be a rule for this. There had to be some line I missed, some instruction hidden between the others. I read the sheet again, slower this time, forcing my eyes not to skip ahead. No headlights after midnight. Future $2 bill. Payphone at 1:17. Pump 4 at 3:33. Route 0. Woman in red. Burn the list at sunrise. Nothing about what to do if something had your voice. Nothing about what to do if you had already spoken. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes until sparks bloomed in the dark. Maybe that meant I was safe. Maybe if it was not on the list, it was not important. Even as I thought it, I knew that was not how these rules worked. The 7th rule said to write a new list for the next employee. That meant the list could change. That meant somebody had survived long enough to learn the current rules, but not everything. It meant there were gaps. I was standing inside one of them. At 12:41, the bell above the front door jingled. I froze in the office doorway. The front entrance was closed. I could see it from where I stood. No one had come in. The bell swayed gently on its little bracket, moving back and forth as if an invisible hand had just brushed past it. I did not step out. I did not say hello. I did not ask who was there. The store remained empty, but from the speaker above pump 2 came a soft imitation of me clearing my throat. Then my voice spoke again, clearer this time. Can I help you? I had never said those words tonight. Not to the man in the gray suit. Not to anyone. The voice was practicing. My blood went cold in a way that felt physical, like someone had poured ice water down the back of my neck. I backed into the office and shut the door, leaving it open just a crack so I could still see the counter. The monitors flickered. On the front door camera, the store looked empty. On the aisle camera, the store looked empty. On the counter camera, I saw myself standing behind the register. I blinked. I was not behind the register. I was in the office, one hand on the doorframe, barely breathing. The image on the monitor showed me smiling faintly at something off-screen. It moved 7 seconds behind reality, I told myself. That was all. A delay. The man had caused a delay somehow. But the Ethan on the monitor raised one hand and gave a small wave. I did not. I stumbled backward, knocking the chair into the desk. The monitor went black, then returned to the live view of the empty counter. I was sweating now, my shirt sticking to my back beneath the uniform. I ripped the name badge off my chest and shoved it into my pocket. The pin scratched my thumb, and the small sting helped me focus. The badge mattered. The voice mattered. Names mattered here. I did not understand the rules yet, but I was beginning to understand the shape of them. The things outside were not trying to scare me. They were trying to get permission. A sale. A name. A voice. Directions. Little pieces of normal human behavior. Each one opening a door I could not see. At 1:05 in the morning, I checked the front windows again. The highway remained empty, but the payphone outside was lit from above by the edge of the canopy light. Its black receiver hung in place. The metal faceplate reflected the store windows. I found myself staring at it before I realized why. Rule 3. Do not answer the payphone if it rings at 1:17 in the morning. No matter who it sounds like. No matter what they say. I looked at the clock. 1:06. 11 minutes. My first thought was to go into the stockroom, shut the door, and cover my ears until 1:18. Then I remembered the woman at the diner saying the same thing. Let it ring. Not hide from it. Not unplug it. Let it ring. That sounded easy until you had to stand in an empty gas station in the middle of the desert and wait for a phone to call with a voice it should not know. I made coffee because I needed something to do with my hands. The pot sputtered and spat, filling the store with a burned smell. I poured half a cup, spilled some on the counter, and did not bother cleaning it. My eyes kept jumping from the clock to the payphone to camera 7. At 1:12, the temperature in the store dropped. Not a little. Enough that my breath began to show in front of my face. The cooler doors fogged from the outside. The windows grew pale at the edges. The coffee in my cup stopped steaming. I whispered, no, without meaning to. From pump 2, My voice whispered it back. At 1:15, the payphone cord began to sway. At 1:16, the receiver clicked once in its cradle. I stepped behind the counter, gripped the edge with both hands, and fixed my eyes on the clock. I would not move. I would not answer. I did not care who it sounded like. Then the clock changed to 1:17, and the phone rang. The sound was sharp and old-fashioned, a metal bell cutting through the station hard enough to make my shoulders jump. Once, twice, 3 times. I clenched my teeth. By the 4th ring, the sound had changed. It was still a ring, but underneath it I heard something else, a small broken breath, the kind someone makes when they have been crying for a long time. By the 5th ring, a voice came from the payphone without the receiver lifting. "Ethan?" My heart stopped. It was my mother. Not close, not clear, thin through distance and static, but hers. I knew every tired edge of that voice. I had heard it on old voicemails for months after she died because I could not bring myself to delete them. "Ethan, honey, I am lost." I could not move. My hands locked around the counter until my knuckles hurt. The rational part of my mind screamed that it was not her. My mother had been gone for 3 years. She had never been to this part of Nevada. She had never called me from a payphone outside a desert gas station at 1:17 in the morning. But grief does not care about rational things. Grief hears the right voice and opens the door before fear can lock it. The payphone rang again, and her voice trembled through the glass. "I am on a road with no signs. I can see your lights. I just need you to tell me how to get back." I squeezed my eyes shut. Tears burned there, sudden and unwanted. I had not cried for my mother in over a year, and I hated that this place could pull that out of me like a receipt from a register. She said my name again. Then she said something only my mother used to say when I was little and scared during thunderstorms. That nearly broke me. I stepped out from behind the counter before I realized I had moved. The bell kept ringing. The receiver still hung in place. The voice begged softly. I was halfway to the door when my shoe slipped on the coffee I had spilled. My hand shot out and hit the counter, and the pain snapped me back into myself. Rule 3. No matter who it sounds like. No matter what they say. I staggered backward, breathing hard, and bit the inside of my cheek to keep from answering. A sharp taste filled my mouth. I did not speak. I did not whisper. I did not even say goodbye. The ringing stopped at 1:18. The silence afterward felt enormous. I stood there shaking, staring at the payphone through the front window. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the black receiver lifted slowly from the cradle all by itself, hanging at the end of its cord. My mother's voice came through one last time, no longer crying. "That is all right, Ethan," it said. "We already know you can hear us." Behind me, the printer under the register turned on by itself. It spat out a single receipt. I did not want to look, but I did. In faint gray letters, beneath the store name and timestamp, it read, "1 guide marked. Directions pending." I stared at the receipt until the letters blurred. 1 guide marked. Directions pending. I wanted to tear it up, but I was afraid touching it would count as accepting something else. That was how my mind worked by then. Every object had become a possible agreement. Every sound was a possible invitation. Every word felt like it might be a key turning in a lock I could not see. I left the receipt where it was, hanging halfway from the printer, and backed into the office with the rule sheet pressed against my chest. The clock above the cigarettes read 1:21. I had survived the phone. If surviving meant I was still breathing, but I did not feel saved. I felt processed, tagged, entered into some system older than the register, older than the cameras, older than the cracked tile under my shoes. I checked my pocket for the name badge and found it there, cold and sharp against my fingers. I had taken it off before the woman in red appeared, which meant at least one rule had not been broken yet. That thought should have comforted me. It did not. At 1:38, camera 7 flickered again. This time, the empty desert behind the building did not stay empty. A shape appeared far beyond the floodlight. So faint I thought at first it was just static. Then the monitor cleared, and I saw the outline of a road. Not a dirt track. Not the highway. A road made of black pavement, darker than the desert around it, running straight toward the back of the gas station from a direction where no road existed. My throat tightened. "There is no Route 0, I whispered in my head, careful not to say it aloud. There is no Route 0. The camera image rolled once, and suddenly there were headlights on that road, dozens of them, all dim and yellow, hanging in the distance like low stars. My knees felt weak. I looked through the back office doorway toward the front windows, but outside the store everything still appeared normal. For pumps, my car, empty highway, payphone. The road existed only on camera 7. Or maybe the camera was the only thing honest enough to show it. At 2:03, the front door bell jingled once. I turned toward the store. No one had entered. Then it jingled again, softer, though the door remained closed. I remembered Rule 6. If the woman in the red coat enters the store, remove your name badge before she sees it. If she says your name first, do not answer. Hide in the stockroom until the bell above the door rings 3 times. My badge was already off, but I suddenly wondered if my name existed in other places. On the schedule, on the register login, on the receipt, on the voice outside. I looked at the counter camera. The receipt still hung from the printer. The word guide sat in the middle of the paper like a label. I moved quickly, crouching low behind the counter, and tore the receipt free with 2 fingers. The paper was warm. I shoved it under an overturned coffee cup, then wiped my hands on my jeans as if that could remove the feeling. At 2:22, every light in the store dimmed at once. Not off. Dimmed, like the building was holding its breath. The coolers went quiet. The air conditioner stopped. The desert outside pressed close to the windows, black and solid. Then the front door opened. The bell did not jingle. A woman stepped inside wearing a red coat buttoned to the neck. It was the only bright color I had seen all night, and somehow that made her look more wrong than if she had been covered in shadows. She appeared to be in her 40s, maybe younger, maybe older. Her hair was dark and neatly pinned back. Her face was calm, ordinary, almost kind, but she moved with the careful stillness of someone imitating how people walk after watching them from very far away. I was crouched behind the counter, one hand over the pocket where my badge was hidden, barely breathing. She looked around the store without moving her head much, her eyes passing over the shelves, the coffee station, the empty office doorway. Then she looked directly at the counter, not at my face, but at the place where I was hiding behind it. "Guide," she said. The word was soft, but it landed inside me like a hand on my shoulder. I did not answer. My jaw locked so tightly it hurt. She took one step farther into the store. The door eased shut behind her. Still no bell. That scared me more than anything. The rule said hide until the bell rang 3 times, but the bell had not rung once when she came in. Maybe that meant the rule had not activated. Maybe it meant the rule was already failing. The woman in the red coat walked toward the counter and stopped exactly where the man in the gray suit had stood. Her shadow stretched across the tile toward the back wall. At first it looked normal. Then the lights flickered, and her shadow changed shape. It rose too tall, thin and branching at the shoulders, like the silhouette of something with antlers or dead tree limbs growing from its back. When the lights steadied, the shadow looked human again. I pressed my hand harder over my mouth. She placed something on the counter above me. Paper sliding against laminate. A map. I could hear it unfold. The sound was crisp, patient, deliberate. "You do not have to speak yet," she said. "That is why the first night is always interesting. New guides think silence means refusal." Her voice was pleasant, educated, almost warm. They rarely understand that listening is also a door. My eyes burned from not blinking. She knew I could hear. The phone had told them. The receipt had told them. The station had told them. She tapped the map once with a fingernail. "We are very close now. Your voice opened the pumps. Your grief opened the line. Your name is still hidden," which was clever, but not clever enough. A slow, cold realization spread through me. The rules were not random. They were not about manners or superstition. They were about preventing pieces of me from being used. My voice, my money, my hearing, my name, my ability to point someone down a road. I was not just an employee. I was a checkpoint. The woman leaned slightly over the counter. I could smell rain on her coat, though there had been no rain in the forecast and the desert outside was dry as bone. "We do not want your world," she said. "Not all of it. Just the road through it. People are always getting lost. People are always looking for shortcuts. We only need one living person to say where to turn." My hand slid toward the rule sheet on the floor beside me. She heard the paper move. Of course she did. Her smile widened, though I could not see it directly. I saw its reflection in the dark microwave door across the aisle. "Do not worry, guide. We will not make you say it. We can wait until you want to." Then she pushed the map farther across the counter. It slid over the edge and dropped in front of me. I looked down before I could stop myself. It was a Nevada road map, old and sun-faded, but everything on it was wrong. Reno sat too far north. Fallon was crossed out. Highway 50 bent in a shape I had never seen. And from the blank space behind hollow pines, a thick black road ran straight through the paper, unlabeled except for a single mark near the station. A circle. Inside the circle, someone had written my name in tiny block letters. Not Ethan. Not Miller. Guide. The woman's shoes turned away from the counter. She started walking toward the front door. I stayed frozen, waiting for the bell. It rang once when she touched the handle, twice when she stepped outside. The third ring did not come. The door closed silently behind her. I waited 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then camera 7 burst into static so bright it lit the office wall. When the picture returned, the black road behind the gas station was full of cars without headlights, lined up bumper to bumper. At the front of them stood the woman in the red coat, facing the camera. She lifted one hand and pointed, not at the store, but at pump 4. The clock above the cigarettes clicked forward from 2:29 to 3:32. The clock should not have been able to do that. I knew it, and still my mind tried to make room for it. Power surge, bad wiring, cheap digital clock, anything but the truth. 2:29 had become 3:32 in a single click, and the rule sheet was already in my hand before I remembered grabbing it. Rule 4. If pump 4 starts running by itself at 3:33 in the morning, shut off the main breaker before 3:40. Do not touch the pump. Do not step in the fuel. I looked through the front windows toward the farthest pump. Pump 4 stood at the edge of the canopy light, closest to the dark, its hose hanging in place, its screen black. For one stupid second, I thought maybe the clock had jumped but the rule would not trigger. Then the minute changed. 3:33. The pump screen flashed green. The handle lifted out of its cradle by itself. It did not fall. It rose slowly, like someone invisible had wrapped a hand around it. The nozzle turned toward the ground. A thick stream poured onto the concrete, but it was not gasoline, not the clear amber shine I knew from 100 stations across Nevada. It was dark, almost black, and it moved too slowly, spreading in a glossy pool beneath the pump. The smell reached the store a heartbeat later, sharp and chemical at first, then old, like damp pavement after rain on a road that had been buried for years. My body wanted to freeze. The rule gave me 7 minutes, but panic made 7 minutes feel like 7 seconds. I had to get to the electrical room. The red key. The smallest key. I shoved the rule sheet into my pocket and ran from behind the counter. The lights above me flickered once, twice, then dropped into emergency red from the exit sign and the low glow of the register. The whole store changed shape in that light. Shelves became narrow walls. Snack bags shimmered like watching eyes. The cooler doors reflected a dozen broken versions of me moving too fast and breathing too hard. From outside, the payphone rang again. Not the old metal ring from before. This time it rang in my mother's voice, each bell almost forming my name. I kept moving. I did not look at it. I did not look at pump 4. I fixed my eyes on the hallway beside the stockroom and forced one foot in front of the other. The bell above the front door jingled once behind me. I stopped so suddenly my shoes squeaked on the tile. The woman in red had not gotten her third ring. Maybe this was it. Maybe the rule was finishing late. The bell jingled a second time. I took another step. A third jingle came from the back door. My blood went cold. There was no customer entrance back there. On the office monitor, camera 7 flared white, then showed the road behind the building fully open now, black and smooth, running through the desert as if it had always been there. Cars without headlights waited bumper to bumper. At the front, the woman in red stood beneath nothing, lit by nowhere. She was no longer facing the camera. She was facing the back door. Then every speaker in the station came alive with my voice. Can I help you? Register is closed. 789. No. The words overlapped, copied pieces of me thrown around the store until I could not tell which sounds came from the speakers and which came from inside my head. I clamped my teeth together so hard my jaw hurt. Do not give them anything else, I thought. Not one more word. I reached the electrical room door and fumbled with the key ring. My hands were slick with sweat. The red key slipped once, hit the floor, and skidded under the stockroom shelf. I dropped to my knees, stretching for it blindly. Behind me, the automatic front door slid open with its soft mechanical sigh. Hot desert air rolled into the store. I did not turn around. I heard footsteps enter, many of them, quiet and patient, stopping just past the threshold. The smell of dust filled the hallway. My fingers closed around the red key. I pulled it out from under the shelf and jammed it into the lock. It would not turn. For one terrible moment, I thought it was the wrong key. Then I realized my hand was shaking too badly to push it all the way in. I forced it steady, twisted, and the lock clicked. Inside the electrical room, the air was warmer and smelled like metal. A gray breaker panel covered most of the wall. Labels had been written on masking tape, some old, some newer, some crossed out so many times they were unreadable. Store lights, coolers, register, pumps 1 through 3. Pump 4 had its own switch, taped over with a strip of red electrical tape. Beside it, in black marker, someone had written, main first. I remembered the rule exactly. Shut off the main breaker. Not pump 4. Main breaker. Outside, the black liquid had reached the front of the store. I saw it through the hallway, sliding under the door mat in a thin dark line. It did not flow like fuel anymore. It reached forward, testing the tile. The payphone rang and rang. My mother's voice cried from it. Ethan, please, I can see the station. Just tell me where to turn. I put one hand over my mouth and used the other to grab the main breaker. It was stiff. It would not move. I pulled harder. Nothing. The clock above the cigarettes read 3:37. 3 minutes. The footsteps in the store shifted closer. A shadow stretched across the hallway wall, tall and branching, and then another, and another, all gathering just beyond the office door. The woman in red spoke from the front of the store, calm as ever. You are doing very well, guide. But if you shut off the lights, how will your mother find you? Something inside me cracked, not into words, but into anger. Not loud anger, not brave anger, just enough to move. I gripped the breaker with both hands, planted one boot against the wall, and pulled down with everything I had. The switch snapped. The station went black. Not dim, not emergency red. Black. The speakers died mid-breath. The payphone stopped ringing. The hum of the coolers vanished. For one suspended second, the silence felt like falling. Then something slammed against the outside of the building, not hard enough to break anything, but close enough that dust shook from the ceiling and drifted across my face. I stayed crouched in the electrical room, one hand still on the breaker, trying not to breathe too loudly. In the dark, I heard the black liquid retreat across the tile with a slow, wet whisper. I heard the front door slide shut. I heard tires rolling over dirt behind the station, dozens of cars backing away down a road I prayed I would never see with my own eyes. When I finally looked at my watch, the hands glowed faintly. 3:41. I had made it by 1 minute. My legs almost gave out. I waited until my breathing slowed before I pushed the breaker back up. The lights returned in stages. First the office monitors, then the coolers, then the overhead fluorescents, buzzing like nothing had happened. The store was empty. The tile was dry. Pump 4 sat silent outside, hose locked in place, screen dark. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over. Then the counter camera flickered. On the monitor, someone stood behind the register with his back to me, wearing an old Hollow Pines uniform shirt. Gray hair, broad shoulders, a tan windbreaker folded over one arm. He turned slightly, and I recognized the face from a faded employee photo taped inside the office cabinet. Cal Briggs, the man Mr. Harris had never mentioned. The old night clerk whose name was scratched into the back of my badge. He was not on the sales floor when I looked through the office door. But on the monitor, he leaned close to the camera and mouthed 4 words I understood perfectly. Do not trust sunrise. For almost an hour after the power came back, nothing moved. That was the worst part. Not the voices, not the phone, not the black road on camera 7, but the silence afterward, because it felt staged. The station returned to its normal shape too quickly. The coolers hummed. The lights buzzed. The register screen glowed pale green. Outside, Pump 4 looked harmless beneath the canopy, its hose resting in place like it had never lifted by itself, like nothing dark had spilled across the concrete, like I had imagined the entire thing from fear and lack of sleep. I stayed in the office with the door half open, watching all 7 monitors until my eyes burned. Every few seconds, I looked at the clock above the cigarette display. 4:12, 4:28, 4:56. Time was moving forward again, 1 minute at a time, and that almost made me cry from relief. I did not speak. I did not call Mr. Harris. I did not touch the payphone. I did not put my name badge back on. I just sat there with my back against the wall and the rule sheet folded in one hand, waiting for the sky outside the front windows to change. By 5:30, the desert beyond the pumps had softened from black to a dull blue-gray. The highway reappeared in both directions. The world looked real again. No dark cars. No woman in red. No road behind the building, at least not on the monitor. Camera 7 showed only empty dirt and pale scrub brush moving slightly in the dawn wind. I told myself I had made it. I had not done everything right, but I had done enough. I had refused the bill. I had not answered the phone. I had shut off the main breaker before 3:40. I was still alive, and in less than 30 minutes the shift would end. That was when I noticed the clock above the cigarettes had stopped. The red digits read 5:33. My watch said 5:48. The register said 5:48. The phone screen in the office said 5:48. Only the wall clock was frozen, glowing 5:33 in the exact same red color as the exit sign during the blackout. I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body stiff from fear, and walked out to the counter. The store felt too large around me. I kept my eyes away from the windows, even though dawn was coming. The rule sheet in my hand felt different now, thicker somehow. I unfolded it on the counter. There were still 7 rules, but the paper was no longer the same. A new line had appeared under Rule 7, written in dark, uneven handwriting that had not been there before. If your name appears before sunrise, the list is no longer for you. I read it 3 times before I understood enough to be afraid. Then the receipt printer clicked. My whole body locked. It printed slowly, one thin strip of paper curling out beneath the register. I did not want to touch it, but I did not need to. I could read the words as they emerged. Hollow Pines Gas and Mart. Night shift transfer. Current clerk, Cal Briggs. Replacement, Ethan Miller. Status, accepted. My mouth went numb. Accepted. Not hired. Not scheduled. Accepted. The bell over the front door jingled once behind me, and I spun around so fast I nearly knocked the coffee cup off the counter. The door was still closed. Outside, the sky had turned a weak silver over the desert. Sunrise was minutes away. The bell jingled again. I looked at the monitor over my shoulder. On the front door camera, the entrance was open, and a man stood just inside the store. Not in the real store, only on the screen. He wore an old green Hollow Pines shirt, faded almost gray, with a name badge on his chest. Cal. He looked older than the employee photo in the office cabinet, but not by years. By nights. His face had the hollow, exhausted look of someone who had been awake for a very long time. He lifted one hand, and the bell jingled a 3rd time. The front door in front of me finally slid open. Cold morning air entered. No one came with it, but the monitor still showed Cal standing beside the ice freezer, watching me. I did not ask who he was. I did not ask what he wanted. I already knew asking questions here was another way of opening doors. Cal pointed at the rule sheet on the counter. Then he pointed at the small metal trash can beside the register. Burn this list and write a new one for the next employee. That was Rule 7. I had thought it meant destroying evidence. I had thought it meant the rules had to be reset every morning. I was wrong. The last rule was not an exit. It was a handoff. The person who survived the night did not leave the station free. He became the next person who knew enough to warn someone else. The rules were not written by the owner. They were not written by Mr. Harris. They were made by the people who lasted long enough to learn what the dark wanted from them. Every rule was a mistake somebody survived. Every line was a receipt. My hand started to shake again, but this time it was not the wild panic from earlier. It was something smaller and worse. Understanding. I turned the sheet over. On the back, names had begun to appear in faint gray print, stacked in a column like old employee records. Cal Briggs, Martin Keller, Josh Reed, Daniel Price. Names I did not recognize. Some were crossed out. Some were blurred. At the bottom, still darkening as I watched, was mine. Ethan Miller. Beside it, the word active appeared letter by letter. Outside, the first edge of the sun broke over the desert. The payphone rang once. Not loud. Not demanding. Almost polite. I did not move. The old list curled in my hand. I found a lighter beneath the counter next to a roll of receipt paper and a box of cheap pens. They had been placed there for me. Of course they had. I held the flame to the corner of the rule sheet over the metal trash can. The paper caught slowly, blackening inward, the typed rules twisting as they burned. When the last piece turned to ash, the stopped wall clock clicked from 5:33 to 6:00. The front door opened for real this time. Mr. Harris walked in carrying a paper cup of coffee and an envelope of cash. He looked at my face, then at the ash in the trash can, then at the blank sheet of paper waiting beside the register. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Finally, he set the envelope on the counter. "You made it," he said. My voice came out rough. "Did Cal?" Mr. Harris looked toward the office monitor. Camera 7 showed empty desert, but in the reflection on the glass, I could see Cal standing behind me, very still. Mr. Harris sighed. "Cal made it farther than most." That was not an answer, but by then I knew this place did not give complete answers. I asked if I could quit. Mr. Harris took a sip of coffee and looked out at Pump 4. "You can drive away," he said. "A lot of them do after the first night. Some get as far as Fallon. One made it to Sparks." He turned back to me. "But once the road knows you can hear it, it does not need the station to find you." I thought of my apartment in Reno, my unpaid bills, my car parked outside under the pale morning light. I thought of my mother's voice coming from a phone that should not have known her. I thought of the receipt that said directions pending. Mr. Harris pushed the blank sheet toward me. "New clerk comes in tonight at 10:45, he said. "He will need rules." I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk out, tear the cash in half, drive west until the desert ended. Instead, I picked up the pen. My first rule was the same one I had been given, but I wrote it clearer. Never serve a customer whose car has no headlights after midnight, even if they only ask for something small. My second rule warned about the $2 bill. My third warned about the payphone and the voices it borrowed. My fourth warned about Pump 4. My fifth warned about Route 0. My sixth warned about the woman in the red coat. For the seventh, my hand hovered over the page for a long time. Then I wrote the truth I wish someone had written for me. If you survive until sunrise, do not think the shift is over. The station is not paying you to work here. It is paying you to keep the road closed. When I finished, the letters looked shaky but readable. Mr. Harris folded the new list and placed it inside a fresh envelope. On the front, he wrote for the new night clerk. "Read before midnight." That night, at 10:58, a younger guy pulled into the lot in a dented Honda Civic, looking tired, nervous, and desperate in a way I recognized immediately. He walked inside wearing the spare green shirt, glancing around like he was trying to convince himself it was just a gas station. I stood behind the counter with my own name badge hidden in my pocket. He noticed the envelope and gave me a weak smile. "Are these from the manager?" he asked. I looked past him to the front windows. Pump 4 sat quiet under the lights. The payphone waited near the ice machine. Far beyond camera 7, something in the desert was already listening. I slid the envelope across the counter and heard myself say the same words Cal had mouthed to me before sunrise. "No, these are the ones that keep you alive."